I do. Have a seat over there, sir. Once you get situated, adjust it so the mic's aimed at your chin and that the light is on the base. All right? Did you want some water before you begin?
Sure.
I don't know if that's water or coffee. Okay, thank you very much. Spill's all on you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, could you please state your name for the record?
James Douglas Couns.
And do you prefer to go by Mr. Coons, Agent Coons?
Most people call me Doug. It's my middle name.
Okay, Doug. Doug, where do you work?
Currently, I own a private investigation company and security consulting firm called Veracity IIR.
Okay, can you tell me a little bit about Veracity?
We've been in business since I retired from the FBI in 2018, and we do all kinds of private investigations, legal consulting, security consulting, a little bit of everything.
And
Mr.
how many?
Sand, I'd like to interrupt you. Can you have him spell his last name again for the record and
Yes.
also the name of the company?
Yes, Mr. Coons, could you please spell your last name?
Sure. Kouns.
And then could you also spell the name of your company for the record?
V is in Victor, ERACITY, and then IIR, which stands for Investigation, Intelligence, and Research.
Thank you.
And how many employees does Veracity have?
I think we're at 14 total, including part-timers.
And what's your position there?
I'm the CEO.
And you had mentioned that you started Veracity after you retired from the FBI, correct?
Yes.
And before we get into that, I'd like to get into your education background. Can you tell me a little bit about your education?
Sure. My undergraduate degree is from Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana in chemistry, and I also have a master's degree in business administration from Grantham.
And what led to you joining the FBI?
It's kind of a long story, but I sat for the exam, passed, went to the FBI Academy, which at the time was a 4-month program. It's quite a bit longer now, but then it was 4 months. Successfully completed the academy and was given my credentials and assigned to my first field office, which was Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Or Minneapolis is the field office. Sioux Falls is a resident agency within the Minneapolis division.
And how long did you serve in the FBI?
22 years.
Can you give me a rundown of what you did during the course of your 22 career?
So the first 6 years was in Sioux Falls, and first 4 or 5 years of that I worked mostly crimes on Indian reservations. After September 11th and the Twin Towers, my focus became more on counterterrorism and counterintelligence. After my 6th year, I was transferred back home to Indiana, where I worked in the Bloomington resident agency out of the Indianapolis division for about 5 years, working mostly counterterrorism. From there, I was transferred to FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., where I was a supervisor in the Weapons of Mass Destruction Directorate Chemical Countermeasures Unit. After that, I was returned back to Indianapolis division, where I was a supervisor of the Field Intelligence Group. After that, I stepped down from being a supervisor and worked cases for the rest of my career.
And Doug, during the course of your time as an FBI agent, about how many suspects have you interrogated?
Over the 22 years as an FBI agent, I would guess around 100.
Ever investigate any cases involving murder or homicide?
Yes.
About how many?
Either my own or assisting other agents or as a member of evidence response team, probably 15.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Getting picked up? Mr. Coons, can you describe the document that I just put in front of you that's been pre-marked as Defense Exhibit 3?
Yes, that's my current.
Your Honor, it needs to be C.
See,
Sorry, thank you.
That's my current curriculum vitae.
what's the curriculum vitae?
It's basically a rundown of my education experience and training.
Now, everything that we had just gone through a minute ago, is that on your CV?
Yes.
Is there anything else that we didn't describe?
There's a few things, yes. I've got some continuing education things. I'm also a certified fraud examiner. I mentioned briefly, but I was a certified member of the Indianapolis Division's evidence response team. What else? Those are the major things. There's a few other.
Looks like you're a first-degree black belt in Taekwondo.
Yes.
I wish that was on my CV. Your Honor, defense would move to enter Exhibit C into evidence.
Mr. Nelson, any objections?
No objection, Your Honor.
Defendant's Exhibit C is received without objection.
And Doug, you had stated that you had done some continuing education and had gotten some certificate credentials, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to put in front of you what's been marked as Defense Exhibit D. You recognize that?
I do.
Can you please describe to the court what that is?
That's the certificate I was given in January 13th of 2005 after completing the FBI's evidence response team training.
What does the evidence response team training course entail?
At the time, it was a 2-week program. It was somewhere south of D.C., Dumfries, Virginia, I believe. We spent a couple of weeks learning how to properly find, collect, process, document, photograph evidence, anything to do with evidence. We learned it during those 2 weeks.
And I assume you completed the course?
Yes,
Is that a true and accurate spelling of your name?
it is.
Your Honor, defendant would move to introduce Exhibit D into evidence.
Mr. Nelson, any objections?
Yes, Your Honor, this document is actually hearsay because it's someone else's statement, not the defendant's, or not, excuse me, not the witnesses.
Over the objection, the court will receive Defendant's Exhibit D.
Thank you, Your Honor. And we'd also request, if need be, to publish C and D.
You may.
Thank you. Now, Doug, during your time as an FBI agent, did you ever testify in court?
Yes.
About how many times?
20, that's a rough guess.
And who did you usually testify for?
Always the prosecution when I was an FBI agent.
And since starting Veracity, I assume you've testified as an expert witness before?
Yes.
About how many times?
Maybe 10, 12.
Have you been qualified or certified every time as an expert in criminal investigation?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, we would request that the court qualify and certify Mr. Coons as an expert in the field of criminal investigation.
Mr. Nelson,
Your Honor, I'd like to briefly voir dire the witness on this.
you may.
Mr. Coons, have you ever been certified as an expert in a North Dakota court?
No.
Okay. You had a 2-week training on collecting evidence.
Yes.
You believe that qualifies you to be an expert?
To some degree, there's also the years of experience I attained in utilizing
Mr. Couns, that was a yes or no question, and I'd like you to stick to my questions.
Yes.
Okay. You believe that
I
2
do.
weeks makes you an expert?
Yes.
Okay. Have you taught courses like that before?
No.
So other people in the FBI didn't come to you to learn how to do those things. You weren't directed to teach other people how to do those things.
No.
Okay.
May I ask a follow-up, Your Honor?
Hang on, he's not done.
Do you have advanced degrees in science or anything like that?
I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry.
Okay. That would be a bachelor's degree. Would that be an advanced degree? What I'm asking is, do you have a master's degree or a PhD in any science?
No.
In fact, your MBA is in, well, you have an MBA, which is a Master's of Business Administration. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
And I suppose that comes in handy as being the CEO. Does it come in handy being an expert in crime scene analysis or investigation?
No.
Okay. Your Honor, at this point, I don't believe that there's enough information to qualify the witness as an expert. So the state would object.
All right. Mr. Sand, did you have something else you wanted to ask?
Yes, Agent Coons. How many criminal investigations were you part of during your 22-year tenure in the FBI?
I'm guessing 100 again.
Okay. No follow-up, Your Honor.
All right. The court will, over the objection of the state, accept Mr. Coons as a certified expert in criminal investigation, qualified and certified. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Coons, I want to go over some kind of, I guess, housekeeping questions. How did you get involved with this case?
I was called by Dick Sand of your office.
Okay. And how are you getting paid in this case?
It was a flat rate, $10,000.
Okay. And have you met with us to discuss your testimony?
Yes.
Does any of that have any effect on your ability to tell the truth?
No.
As a follow-up, does every case that you take on result in you testifying in front of a jury?
It does not.
Tell me about that.
Sometimes my opinion on the matters that I review are not favorable for their client, and therefore I'm not called. However, it is valuable information for them. They tend to look to negotiate some sort of plea bargain at that point if I think that their client is guilty of something.
Now, speaking to this case, what is your process when you take on a case as an expert?
It varies depending on what kind of case it is and what's given to me. In this case specifically, I was giving a very large amount of documents, videos, audio recordings, pictures. As the detective testified, it was a lot.
How did you, where did you get the material?
I was given access to a Dropbox file.
From who?
From your office.
And to the best of your knowledge, where did we get it from?
From the prosecution.
And Sergeant Asham had testified that she did not review the entire file of you.
I did.
Okay. Can you tell me how voluminous the file is?
I would say it's between 6,000 and 7,000 pages of documents, hundreds of hours of audio and video recordings, hundreds of pictures. Oh, let me take that back. About 100 pictures, crime scene and otherwise. Now, when I say I reviewed it, I at least looked at every document. Some of it I would deem unimportant, and it would get kind of squirreled away. I might pull it back out later if I ran into some reason to pull it back out. But there were a lot of interviews done, a lot of false leads that were tracked down that didn't go anywhere, and I didn't spend a lot of time on that because there's so much. You had to kind of prioritize what was important.
When did you begin your investigation into the file?
It was June of 2023.
So you've had almost 2 years here.
Correct. I did the bulk of the work in a 3-4 month period when I first got it, and it kind of went on the back burner for a long time. And then a few months ago, when this appeared to be headed for trial, got it back out, refreshed my memory.
Now, you prepared a report in this case?
I did.
What was your process in preparing that report?
So I had to go through all that material. There was also all the Cold Justice Show material. looked at all that, and I started with the probable cause affidavit, looking at the broad strokes of what the government says results in this person being charged with the crime. And some of the elements there, I would then try to identify in the volumes of documents that I went through there. It also wasn't very organized. So, there were PDF files that weren't titled, so you had to open up every single thing to see what it was, and there were multiple things in each of those files that weren't necessarily related. So it was quite an effort.
And in your review of the case, were there suspects either identified by law enforcement or that you would identify as persons of interest or suspects on your review of the case?
Yes, as I went through, I noticed that there were several main people of interest and or suspects, however you want to call it. Several of them stood out to me as well. And then watching the cold justice material, they had, I believe, four suspects that they identified as worthy of a look. But I thought they had left out one.
Okay, can you tell me who the 4 suspects cold justice had, and then the person that you thought they left out?
So they had Nicole, Tyler Schmaltz, Nicole Rice, then Thomas, Tyler Schmaltz, Marty Arnell, Marty Arnell, and Michael Van were the 4 visited on the show. It jumped right out to me that they left out Devin Hall.
And I think just for flow, so people can follow, it makes sense to work through those suspects. Some things might come up, but I'll try to stay on track here. You mentioned the first suspect, Nicole, who's sitting to my right here. After reviewing the file, what did you learn about Nicole's involvement in this?
So as I said, the first thing I read was the probable cause affidavit, and one of the big elements of this was that prosecution believed that whoever committed this act had to have a key, and that was a point that I disagree with.
Why is that?
I don't think they had to have a key because we don't know for sure that the door was locked when whoever got there came in. They could have encountered an unlocked door, entered, locked it behind them, done their act, and then exited through the window. Or they could have come in through the window and back out of the window. Despite this reenactment thing, it can be done. Locks can be picked. That's a cheap lock that can get purchased at any hardware store, and there's multiple videos online of people picking them in seconds. Whether or not a key can be reproduced, we heard testimony of that. There were not self-service kiosks back in those days, but you could go to a hardware store and get a key reproduced if you took it to someone to do it for you. And Laura Knapp's testimony, well, I didn't see her testimony. I was not in here at that point, but in the materials that I reviewed, it wasn't clear that they knew that the door was even locked when she came. She put her key in it and turned it, but the handle is not integrated with the lock. So I'm not even sure if it was locked. I think it probably was when they got there, but I can't be sure.
So is it your testimony that we can't be certain if somebody did enter through the door, but if they did enter through the door, it could have been anybody?
Correct.
What did you learn as far as, there's been a lot of talk. You sat here through Sergeant Asham's testimony. There's been a lot of talk about the timeline of the weekend that Anita was killed.
Yes.
What is your understanding about Nicole's timeline during that weekend?
So reviewing all this material, it sticks out to me, and there are inconsistencies in the statement. I will grant that. To me, they're not relevant or pertinent. So the common theme is she went home on Friday, I believe that's the 1st of June after work, packed her bags for a weekend home in Velva at her parents' farm. And she thinks that Anita was home at that time, but wasn't sure, thought she was in her room with the door locked. I believe there was music heard, maybe voices heard. Spent the night at the apartment in Minot. Went to the parents' farm in Velva, met up with them to then go to a family function in, I've heard it called Sykeston, and I've also heard Carrington. I think they may be neighboring towns. I've heard it interchangeably, so I'm not sure which is accurate. But went to this family event, which was a going away party for a cousin who was leaving for Iraq. Was there for a time, left with cousin Alyssa, and then traveled to, I believe they went first to Alyssa's home. They may have run back to the house in Velva to pick up some cheese dip that Nicole liked, and then went back to Alyssa's home to watch a movie. There are variations of that account. There's one account where she leaves out that part and just went home. Nowhere in there did I see that she traveled back to her apartment in Minot.
Okay. Now, there's been some testimony from Sergeant Ashram about inconsistencies of in Nicole's interviews.
Yes.
Are you aware of that? What are your thoughts about those inconsistencies?
You know, I saw them too. We also talked about how, you know, this happened in 2007. She's been interviewed multiple times, I think at least 4 times, over 17, 18-year period now. And the story has changed a little bit. Again, I don't see anything that jumps out to me as like, oh my God, we got her. You know, it's small details. It's like, we went from the house in Velva to the family function, and then, okay, in this first version, we left out the bar. But why is that significant? She still isn't back in Minot where she would have had access to Anita.
Is it fair to say that it's a common explanation of a college kid that goes home for the weekend and hangs around their hometown?
Right. I know when I was in college, you know, I'd say I'm going home for the weekend. That doesn't mean I'm going to be literally at my parents' home where I was brought up that entire week. That means I'm going to my hometown. I might meet up with friends. I might meet up with other family. It just means I'm going back to where I was raised.
Now, during the course of your reviewing of the case file, did you have a chance to look at any of the interviews of Brenda or Mark Glenn's?
I did.
Okay. What can you tell me of what you learned from those?
I learned from those in the very first interview. She gave an account of
She being who? I'm sorry.
Brenda Glenn's gave an account of Nicole stating to her on a road trip from Arizona, I believe, or New Mexico, that she had gone back to Minot at some point over the weekend to get clothes. There was a second interview of her, I think the time the cold justice people were in town, where she is not sure of herself on that point. And they, you know, listening to the audio, they say, it's right here in the report. And she's like, well, I guess if I said it, it must have been true. But it doesn't sound like she's confident on that at all. There's a third interview where a private investigator, not myself, interviewed her and to try to clarify this point. At that point, she's clear that when Nicole went home to get her clothes, that was Friday after work, before she went to the parents' farm. And then that was the last I knew before we got here.
I believe you testified earlier regarding the timeline about Friday. You just mentioned that you grabbed some clothes on Friday. And correct me if I'm wrong, are you saying that she went to the family farm on Friday or
Nope.
on
No,
Saturday?
she went
Okay.
to her, and see, and this is a part of the problem, I think. When the interviews talk to Nicole, they use the word home, and I've done it. I'm guilty of it here right now. Sometimes it's not clear. Are you talking about home, your apartment in Minot, or home, your parents' farm where you grew up? I think sometimes that makes people confused on both sides when they're talking. And so on Friday after work, she went to her apartment in Minot, got her clothes. The next morning, Saturday morning, she left, went to her parents' farm in Velva.
Now, we established that you were in the courtroom during Sergeant Astrom's testimony. Do you remember her talking about the alleged admissions that Nicole made to people like William May and Ms. I'm not sure what her name is now, but
I do.
Christine Imhoff, formerly.
Right.
Can you tell me a little bit about your review of the case file, review of those alleged admissions, and, you know, as an expert witness, what you think of those?
You know, I reviewed all the same things, and I scoured and scoured looking for more to this. And what sticks out to me is there's very little context leading up to when this alleged confession was made. We know that there was this drunken party, and that Nicole has been reported as being belligerently drunk. Now, was she the only one that was that drunk? I don't know. How drunk was everybody else? How drunk were the people that allegedly heard this confession? So the story was that, and this is according to May, she was being asked about the murder and hassled about it, and at some point she just said, "I did it." And that was the end of it. And so it doesn't make sense for me. So was there no logical follow-up conversation to that? Was there, you know, I would think you would continue to get questions about, really, why did you do that? And a lot of this. And then I also looked for where was this ever reported to law enforcement, and I never found it anywhere in all that materials, all those materials.
As a 22-year FBI veteran and now an expert witness, what type of weight of credibility do you give to belligerently drunk statements?
Objection, Your Honor.
Your objection is?
Credibility would be the province of the jury.
Your Honor, he's been certified as an expert in criminal investigations. I'm sure he's dealt with intoxicated suspects before and intoxicated witnesses.
He has been certified as an expert with regard to, so I would prefer, I will sustain the objection, I would prefer if you reworded your question more specifically.
Sure. Thank you, Your Honor. During your review of the case file, how much weight do you give to those statements that we just discussed?
Not very much, but I don't discount them completely.
Okay, why is that?
Again, there's lack of context prior to and after. The statement in and of itself does not make sense to me. This is a person that has been through multiple law enforcement interrogations over this matter and has held her ground firmly. It does not make sense to me that at a party of people that she doesn't seem to know that well is going to actually confess. I don't know anything about the tone of the comment. It could have been sarcastic if it was made. And I don't. All the people there, I'm assuming, are drunk, and I don't know that, but their recollections of this could be off or skewed. It's just not something I would hang my hat on.
Now, in review of the case file, did you notice any type of interrogation techniques that law enforcement used with Ms. Rice?
Yes, in one of the interviews, I believe in 2022, with the cold justice people, one of the investigators was using a Reed style technique. Reed is a school of thought on asking specific questions that elicit a type of response. It helps the interrogator determine if they're on the right track, if they're getting indications of deception or not.
What did you learn in this case?
So, for example, in this case, I believe she was asked if she thought it could have been an accident. You know, so that's a Reed technique. And a guilty person might latch on to that. Now, it's not foolproof. You can't say just because they answered this question in this way that they didn't do it or they did do it, but it helps you along the way. So a person who may not have done this would give you a soft answer like, oh yeah, it could have been an accident. Maybe they were holding a knife and tripped and fall. Yeah, I'm making up an example, but that's an answer you might get from somebody that would tell me as an investigator, I need to dig in here. That's not what I want to hear. Well, it is what you want to hear if you think the person did it. But also, there's a question asked, what do you think should happen to somebody that did something like this, meaning commit the murder? Now, a guilty person is going to give a soft answer like, well, people make mistakes. People should get second chances. You know, they should get some sort of punishment, but something like that, kind of wishy-washy. Someone who has possibly not committed the act would give you a more definitive, they should rot in jail. And that's exactly what Nicole said.
Nicole said what?
They should rot in jail.
So what did you take from that answer?
To me, that's an indication that she did not commit the act.
Now, based on everything that we went over, Nicole, and your training and experience as an FBI agent, what's your expert opinion regarding the allegations about Nicole in this case?
Although it's not impossible, I don't think it's likely that she's responsible.
The next suspect that you had listed off was a man named Tyler Schmaltz.
Yes.
Do you remember saying that?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you learned about Mr. Schmaltz in your investigation in this case?
Similar to what the detective testified to, Tyler was a high school friend of Anita's. They went to prom together. I would add that I read that they went to prom together as friends. So he was interested in her romantically. The feelings were not mutual. My understanding is she kept him in the friend zone, the dreaded friend zone. And others described him as having an obsession with her. And there wasn't a lot of details as to why they felt he was obsessive over her. And one thing that my understanding was that he moved into that apartment complex after Nicole. So I could be wrong on that, but that was my takeaway from it.
When you say after Nicole, do you mean after?
Or I'm sorry, yeah, after Nicole and Anita moved into that same complex.
After reviewing the case files, is it your understanding that Tyler Schmaltz and Anita did go to junior prom or some type of prom together?
I don't know which prom it was, but a prom, yes.
And there was some testimony by Sergeant Asham regarding a disturbing drawing that Mr. Schmaltz had drawn in either grade school or middle school. Can you speak to that?
Yes.
Your knowledge of that after reviewing the case file?
Yes, I read the same reports. It was 6th grade, so however old a person is that, what, about 10 years old? My kids are very much older. I don't remember how old they were in 6th grade.
Sure.
But anyway, it was 6th grade. Megan, I believe her last name was Zeitz, was a new girl to the school. Tyler became obsessive towards her. Again, the feelings weren't mutual. And at some point in band class, a teacher confiscated a drawing that he had made, which was a depiction of him stabbing her in the breasts and vagina.
What did you take from that?
It's disturbing. This person could have some deep-seated issues, and it's certainly something that would have been a red flag for me if I were investigating this.
Yeah. During the course of your investigation of this case, is that the only type of disturbing thing that you found regarding Mr. Schmaltz?
No. So it piqued my curiosity. So this is really the only additional research I did myself. I found him on social media, scrolled through his posts at the time, and I found some references to the Jason, the Friday the 13th movies, dancing around with a bloody knife. It's a video clip. It ends with the bloody knife stuck in the sand with the water washing up against it. There was also Christmas cookies in the shape of knives and decorated with red icing to look like bloody knives.
And you said that you found this during the course of your investigation. Is it fair to say that these were posted online within the past 2 years? To the best of, I'll rephrase, Your Honor, I apologize. To the best of your knowledge, when were these posted online?
After the murder. I don't remember the date.
You find it odd for somebody who had been a suspect on a television show in a stabbing murder to post stuff like that on social media?
Yes,
Objection, Your Honor. There's no foundation for any testimony regarding someone being on a TV show.
Sustained. There's no connection, Mr. Sands.
No, that's fine. But you had mentioned that you had seen the Cold Justice Program, correct?
I have.
And in the Cold Justice Program, Tyler Schmaltz was listed as one of their suspects, correct?
Yes. There was another oddity in that during his interview, which was
Objection, Your Honor. There's no question currently before the witness.
Sustained.
What did you learn about Cold Justice's investigation into Tyler Schmaltz after watching the show?
so there's the TV show, what made it actually on, and then in our discovery, there's also the other stuff that was cut. So in his interview that I watched, they at the end they asked him, Tyler, would you do something like this? And he said, no, not me, not to her anyway. On the TV show, it cuts it off to the part about the not to her anyway. To me, as an investigator, that's another red flag. I'm going to follow up on that. Like, well, so what do you mean by that? Who would you do it to? It's just an odd statement to me.
In your review of the case file, was there a follow-up?
No.
You mentioned Cold Justice. Based on your review of the case, how long did their investigation while they were physically in Minot, North Dakota last?
I would say 10 days to 2 weeks.
And who were the people from Cold Justice that were involved in that investigation?
I'm sure there were cameramen and people like that, but the two main ones were Kelly Siegler and Steve Spingola.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you learned about Kelly Siegler?
I learned that on at least two occasions, she was accused of and found to have committed prosecutorial misconduct.
What's prosecutorial misconduct?
Objection
to the
as
best
to
of your
relevance, Your
knowledge?
Honor.
She's an investigator in the case, Your Honor.
She was not
She's
involved
not an
in
investigator
matters.
in this case, Mr. Sands.
She aided Sergeant Asham. Sergeant Asham testified that Cold Justice aided her investigation.
They might have aided her in the investigation, but they weren't part of this investigation as far as I know.
Your Honor, Ms. Siegler is listed she asks questions in interviews of suspects with Sergeant Asham.
Okay, so your position here is that you're going to the credibility of Ms. Siegler based upon her being charged with something. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Nelson?
Your Honor,
I think your objection was what?
relevance. And the other issue here is that I was just reading the finding. It's a several-year-old case. State v. Hillsman, an individual not called as a witness. The trial court did not abuse its discretion by precluding defense counsel from attempting to impeach through use of extrinsic evidence credibility of an individual who is not a witness for either state or defense. So unless they're planning on calling this person as a witness, we didn't call this person as a witness. There's no basis for this, Your Honor.
Again, Mr. Sand?
Your Honor, I'd be happy to lay a little more foundation by refreshing the witness's recollection regarding Ms. Siegler's involvement in this case.
All right, you may.
Your Honor, there's been nothing showing that the witness needs their recollection refreshed.
Not recollection refreshed. I thought he was going to give more foundation.
Opposing counsel just said that he was going to refresh the recollection.
To lay foundation, Your Honor. I'm going to lay foundation. I'm going to ask to approach the
I'm
witness.
clear on this. I know who Ms. Siegler is based upon testimony that's been given in this case. At this point, you're going to attempt to impeach her credibility as someone who works for Cold Justice. Is that my understanding?
Well, and somebody that aided in the investigation in this case that I will refresh Mr. Couns' recollection, she took part in interviews of witnesses along with Sergeant Asham. She asked questions to witnesses during the investigation. She was an active investigator in this case, Your Honor, not just a TV personality.
I will overrule your objection, Mr. Nelson. He can follow up with his questions.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Doug, you had already stated that during your case review, you had looked at the interviews of Brenda and Mark Glynns, correct?
Correct.
Do you have those memorized?
No.
If I approached you and to refresh your recollection with a copy of those, would that help?
It would.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Your Honor, I have to object. There's no question that is put forward that he needs to have refreshed at this point.
Mr.
Once-
Sand?
I asked if he had memorized the entire transcript, Your Honor.
And this is the transcript of whom?
This is a transcript of Brenda and Mark Glynns. I did ask that question. I asked if he reviewed Brenda and Mark Glynns' transcript. He said he had. I said, do you remember the entire transcript? He said he did not. I said, if there's parts of the transcript that you do not remember, and I approached you to review it, would it help refresh your recollection? He said yes.
Okay, but again, maybe I missed something here in the transition, but I thought we were talking about Ms. Siegler, or Kelly Siegler.
Yes, Your Honor. I'm happy to lay some foundation from here before I approach.
All right, you may do that.
Now, Agent Couns, you had stated that you did review the interview of Brenda and Mark Glynns.
Yes.
Do you know who all took part in that interview?
I do not.
Okay. If I approached you and showed you a copy of the interview, would that help refresh your recollection?
It would.
Your Honor, I have to object because the witness has not testified that he knew that at some point. That's what refreshing recollection requires.
Overruled. He can't ask that question. He's refreshing his memory as to who did that interview with the Glynns, as it were, Brenda and Mark Glynns. So you may do that, Mr. Sand.
Am I getting picked up? Thank you. Now, Agent Couns, I put in front of you a copy of that interview. You just take a look at the parties involved at the top.
Yes, it's Brenda and Mark
Your
Glynns.
Honor, I have to object. He's reading from it.
I know.
Yes,
Can you read it to yourself?
thank you.
Yes, I can read it.
Okay. And then, can you hand it back to me?
Yes.
Did that refresh your recollection as to who the participants in the Brenda Glynns and Mark Glynns recorded interview were?
Yes.
Can you tell me who that was?
Brenda and Mark Glynns, Carmen Asham, and Kelly. I don't believe it has her last name there, but Kelly Siegler from Cold Justice.
And in that interview, Kelly Siegler, along with Sergeant Asham, are asking Brenda and Mark Glynns questions regarding this case, correct?
They are.
Would you, in your expert opinion and in your 22 years as an FBI agent, say that Ms. Siegler was actively involved in the investigation?
Absolutely. And there are many other examples of her asking other people questions.
Your Honor, that being stated, I would like to continue my questions regarding the background of Ms. Siegler.
You may proceed.
Thank you.
Over the objection.
I can't remember my first question, so we're going to go back. You had stated that Cold Justice was involved and that Kelly Siegler was one of the investigators that helped out with the Minot Police Department, correct?
Correct.
And what did you learn about Kelly Siegler?
I learned that in the past she had been accused of and found to have conducted prosecutorial misconduct in a couple of trials when she was the prosecutor in a county in Texas.
And what year did that occur?
One of them was 2015, and I believe the other one was 2002.
When did Ms. Siegler help out with this investigation?
2022.
Anything else you learned about Ms. Siegler?
She has also been sued at least 2 times for defamation, for...
Your Honor, I'm going to make the same objection. This is
I'll
not
withdraw
relevant.
that question, Your Honor.
Thank you.
We can move on. But one last question about the Glenn's interview. It was Sergeant Asham and Kelly Siegler that were asking Brenda Glenn's questions, correct?
Correct.
All right, Mr. Coons, next on your list of the suspects that you rattled off was a man named Michael Van. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you learned about Michael Van during your review of this case?
Michael Van was either seeing or wanted to be seeing Anita. They had some sort of a relationship. I'm not sure if it was very deep at the time.
Okay. Did they have a texting relationship?
They did. Michael Van was the last person Anita texted with, to our knowledge, before she died.
Can you explain to the court what cell site is?
Cell site location information, CSLI is often called. That is obtained from telephone company providers, and it can give you back in 2007, it could give you the rough location of where a cell phone was at a given time.
Was that used in this case?
It was.
How many times?
Once that I found.
With who?
His name was Gio Rodriguez.
Was it used with Mr. Van?
Not to my knowledge. I didn't find any other CSLI on any of the other subjects. So that was a big question for me, is if you could get it for Gio Rodriguez, who was only ever a minor suspect or person of interest, why wouldn't you have obtained it for all of the subjects? That would totally clear up where Ms. Rice was on the time in question, if they had it.
I don't want to ask the same question twice, but can you go a little more in depth as to how cell site works? Is there some form of triangulation process?
Yes, and I'm not an electronics person, but I know enough about it as a user. I used it many times in my career as an FBI agent. So we've all got our cell phones with us almost constantly these days. And even if you don't, you're typically hitting off more than one cell tower. So this tower is hitting off of you from this direction. This tower is hitting on you from this direction. Now it will ultimately connect to the one that has the strongest signal to, but it will place you at that intersection. So back in the day, it'd put you, if you were looking for somebody, it'd give you maybe a city block. Nowadays, it puts you within feet.
And this was used in the investigation of this Gio Rodriguez?
It was.
And we were talking about the text messages between Michael Van and Anita. Was it used during that?
No.
And there had been some testimony from Sergeant Asham regarding text messages between Anita and my client, Nicole.
Yes.
Was it used in that investigation?
Not to my knowledge. I didn't see it.
Cell site wasn't used to triangulate or to, within a city block, determine where Ms. Rice was in this case?
Correct.
And she was texting that weekend?
Correct.
Okay. That being said, as far as Michael Van as a suspect, what's your expert opinion on Mr. Van?
You can't rule him out. In my opinion, he's not a very strong suspect.
I'm going to stop you there. I know it's not perfect, but this is where we're going to stop for the day. Time is 37 minutes after 4. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning. 8:30 work for you, Ms. Sorgan?
That's fine, Your Honor.
Mr. Sand?
8:30? Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, just want to make sure. All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're going to recess until tomorrow at 8:30, so please be here at 10 minutes before that if you can. Have to worry about finding you. I will once again give you my